topping off my wine cup.
Your liter of
My wine cup.
your liter of alcohol that you're drinking right now.
Where's my wine cup? We can edit that out! We can edit that out! We can edit that out!
And we're back.
Hi, welcome to We Can Edit That Out, Season 2, Episode 9.
Episode 9. Holy shit.
That's a German word, 9.
Yeah, it is.
Huh. There's 8 words before that. Anyway, can we start over?
No, that's actually, this is how we're starting.
This
We don't get a start over.
This is my punishment for being so hammered the last
fucking
episode.
Buzz Killington.
But it's called We Can Edit That Out. That means we get as many takes as we want.
Uh-huh.
All right. So I'm one of your lovely hosts, Jack,
This is Rob.
and we are a podcast.
Yeah. The We Can Edit That Out podcast.
We Can Edit That Out podcast. Anyway, that's all the information you need. Now let's get to talking shit. Something I've been asked lately is I'd like to know more about what you guys have been listening to lately. Some people like our taste in music. And Lou, Yulis's girlfriend, she said every time I listen to an episode, I get new bands to listen to. And I want more of that. So, hey, we're here to please. You know, if you got criticisms and suggestions, want to hear more of that, let us know. So, we're going to start with that. Rob, what have you been listening to?
Kind of mixed bag.
Never heard of them.
New
Are they good?
No.
Where are they from?
One of my favorite bands, New Model Army, just dropped a new record, Unbroken. I just got it in the mail today. Mm-hmm. I've been listening to it. It's pretty good. Nice, like, tribal post-punk. If you're familiar with the band, it's pretty decent offering for a band that's been around for like 40 years.
All right.
So that's been on the top of the list. I recently got a record I'm really excited about, which is the repress of this kind of cult Hamburg Deutsch punk band called Torpedo Moscow. They only really put out one LP, I think, in their entire career. They never really did anything else. But this one LP is just so fucking solid.
It's a ripper.
And it's just an all-around really good, like, standard, awesome punk record, but also kind of has a little bit of a post-punk vibe to it, too, which I really like. And Germans in the 80s were really good at making kind of, like, marginally depressing, you know, hardcore punk crossed with post-punk, and it's one of my favorite genres of music. So
Yeah, Chaos Z kind of did that as well.
definitely.
And quite a few other bands. So that was something that sort of separated Deutsche Punk from American punk, is that they did have that melody to it, you know, to where I feel like in the 80s, a lot of American and English and Scandinavian as well, we're just doing the harder, faster, louder kind of take, which I still fucking love, but for some reason the Deutsche Punk during that era was very melodic, you know, and I still really like it, you know, and it's just, it's catchy, you know, even, and I got into it at an early age too, even though I didn't understand any German. I just really liked the melody of a lot of the old Deutsche Punk records, you know.
Yeah, me too.
Fucking cool.
And I don't know if it's just like the symptom of living in a kind of post-war divided city, so they have this kind of existential like heaviness kind of permeating the whole scene.
I mean, kind of like post 3 wars, you know,
Yeah.
post First World War, post Second World War, post Cold War, you know.
Well, I guess that was mid Cold War.
Yeah.
really.
There is definitely a difference between the East and the West Deutsch bands, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, in the East you had like Schleimkeim, which was more in your face than the Hamburg bands, you know. Slime was a Hamburg band as well.
Well, also I think because it was so illegal for these East German punk bands to exist, you know, a lot of the recordings are really raw You also have to think like they didn't really have so much access to like concerts and stuff. Like a lot of the culture they had was really clandestine and kind of underground.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I think West Germany benefited more from a bit more cultural freedom around that stuff. You know, like the German punks were all targeted by the East German punks were constantly targeted by Stasi agents and were kidnapped for like days on end and had the shit beaten out of them. So like, I think there's a different sense of urgency in the East German stuff than there is in the West German stuff, at least till the wall came down.
Have you ever read that book, Burning Down the House, Haus?
Yeah, you're the one who
You did read that.
Yeah, I told
Oh,
as soon as you recommended it to me, I ran out and bought it, and it was fucking
I didn't
fascinating.
know anybody ever listened to what I said.
I mean, I try not to,
Wait, what?
but that book is really fascinating, and it was like it's basically it follows the stories of maybe 6 or 7 different well-known people from the East German punk scene, the East Berlin scene. It's mostly focused on Berlin, but like they cover some other villages and stuff.
they hit Leipzig and Dresden a bit. With the like Planlos, I think was
Planlos.
Leipzig.
Planlos. There's a Wutanfall, I think is like the
Wutanfall?
Wutanfall. I think that's like the
For our American listeners, Wutanfall.
yeah.
For the German listeners, Wutanfall.
Yeah,
There's a difference between the way they say the W. A lot of people don't know that.
that's true.
That's why they say, "What are you thinking about?" Anyway, I shouldn't do accents. Okay.
Yeah, maybe not.
Okay. So just pretend I didn't try and do an accent.
Okay.
We can make this a let's pretend episode.
Yeah, sure.
Let's pretend I'm not drunk.
Anyways,
has that ever worked?
You're already derailing yourself, my friend.
I know. Hey, we're picking. See, we like to segue one episode to the next. So this episode, I'm starting really hammered,
And then you're gonna get sober by the end.
Yeah, I'm gonna drink myself sober.
Okay.
Crazy. Has that ever worked?
It has for me, for sure.
I don't know.
I've definitely drank myself sober many times.
I think that's a urban legend that you can actually drink yourself
No,
sober.
it's not. If you do it professionally, it'll work.
I'm trying to think if I ever got actually paid to drink. I mean, I've gotten paid to do a lot of things I was drinking at. Like I was the MC for a semi-professional wrestling event. That was kind of fun. Drank heavily, got paid for it. But the point was that I was supposed to be an MC.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever paid you to drink.
No, not just actually drink. Like sit here and drink. I'm gonna give you money. That'd be rad, But anyway, we're off topic.
So, anyways, I've been listening to this Torpedo Moscow record.
Yeah.
And it's great.
There we are.
It's interesting revisiting some stuff, particularly German punk that I listened to when I was in my 20s that I didn't really totally understand, or when I was a teenager, because I didn't know any German. And now that I've been sort of working on learning German a little harder, I can actually open up these lyric sheets and actually understand what people are saying. And it's interesting when you go from listening to an international band and not really being able to understand it, but you can tell by context what they're talking about. Or sometimes you'll hear the word like Polizei or, anarchy or something like that. And you can kind of infer what the song's about, but you don't really understand it totally. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of cool being able to actually pick up these lyric sheets and read them for the first time and really understand them. It's cool.
It was good.
Yeah. What have you been listening to?
Oh, Zlieft just dropped a new album. I've been listening to that. Zlieft. Slift, French band. They kind of play like a psychedelic progressive thrash-ish. I don't know if I would call it thrash. But on the metal side, more aggressive metal side.
I thought they kind of sounded like Neurosis a little bit.
Yeah, okay. I see that in there, But with like a more psychedelic edge to them. At work, I listen to a lot of psychedelic and stoner stuff because, I'm not a pot smoker by any means. But when I work, I like to be able to focus without having to focus on the music, you know? When I first started tattooing, I was listening to just all the typical DB, crust, and punk that, you know, everybody listens to at that age. But the more complicated my tattoos got, the easier the music I listened to got, you know? So now I just kind of listen to like Hawkwind style stuff, you know, just to like be able to zone out and concentrate on what I'm doing, and instead of being like derailed from my process. You know what I mean? So Zleeft has a new album, and the album before I would like a lot more, although I haven't listened to the new one enough to give it a chance. So that's what I've been listening to at work. And at home, I still listen to just hard, fast, and loud shit, you know. Regression Attack from Russia has been really high on the playlist. They're like kind of like stenchcore crust from Russia. But they also have some psychedelic elements thrown in there too, which I really find captivating because I listened to so much of all this kind of music growing up that you really kind of got to do something a bit different now for me to pay attention, you know? If it's just like generic DB or generic mid-tempo crust, I just don't give a fuck anymore, you know?
Yeah.
You got to cross some lines and innovate. Yeah,
Sure.
innovate. Or if you keep it straight to the basics, you gotta be real fucking good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's one band that kind of really caught my attention, and normally I'm not like so into like the hardcore scene, but there's
You mean like hardcore?
not well, kind of, but there's a band called Gel. They're from New Jersey.
Oh, I've heard of them. Yeah, they're like a psychedelic kind of hardcore.
Not really. They're more just like a straight up hardcore punk band, but they lean more towards like the hardcore side of things, like what you would consider to be like stompy, like New York hardcore or something, but not with like all the.
Because they were recommended to me like in psychedelic hardcore vein.
Yeah, they're not. I wouldn't say they're psychedelic at all.
Okay.
But they're. I don't know. I got sucked into the 7-inch and the LP, and like I think they're just sometimes even something that can be very basic and standard can be really fucking good. And
Absolutely.
and I think Gel is just really fucking good at what they do. And I just got entranced by it. And I've been putting the record on repeat, which is weird, you know, because I still love hardcore punk. It's more of like a live thing for me these days. Like I listen to more like instrumental music and kind of weird shit, because normally when I have time to sit down and listen to music, it's actually like when I'm working or something.
Yeah, and same as me. You don't like to listen to anything too distracting.
Yeah, and
when you're working.
And most of the time, I really just like listening to soundtracks and stuff that's instrumental, because the vocals will start taking my attention away.
Yeah.
I got also been listening a lot to this band, Die Haut. And Die Haut is a German post-punk band that worked a lot with other musicians. So at its core, Die Haut was like an instrumental band, but they had a lot of guest singers that they would bring in. So like Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, or Nick Cave, Blixa Bargeld from Einstürzende Neubauten, all of these sort of like really well-known post-punk noise rock musicians in the 80s would be guests on Die Haut records.
Okay, well, what does it sound like?
Die Haut's awesome. It's like I don't know. It's instrumental post-punk with kind of like almost like a movie soundtrack kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, but which movie? Because a movie soundtrack can be like very all over the place, you know. You got Amadeus, and then you got
okay. So they have like
Decline of Western Civilization.
They have somewhere in between those two.
Perfect.
I mean, they have a bit of like
right up my alley.
They have a bit of like a dark Americana vibe, you know, where it's somewhere in between like Link Ray and post punk, you know. So it's kind of got like this single coil guitar kind of twanginess, but it's like fast and like a little aggressive. Okay. It's really good.
Sounds like nothing I'll ever listen to.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll play it for you, and
Yeah, play it for me sometime.
you might actually enjoy
Surprise
something
me.
that's not psychedelic fucking.
Oh, this isn't. Okay. We started the last
I'm just
episode making fun of
joking, I'm
Rob. Now we're
joking.
starting this episode.
I love
making fun of
psychedelic music
Jason.
too. I'm just giving you shit.
All right.
So Slift, what else? Sleeft?
Now I'm grumpy.
Oh, you're mad now?
Yeah. So anyway, let's take the focus off of me. You were telling me before we started that you just got your visa.
Yeah.
So you've had a bunch of visas before. Which visa is this? Maybe for our viewers who don't really know, we can talk about how many visas you need to get and what and why.
Okay, so
But keep it brief.
so
Because this shit can get boring as fuck.
we're immigrants here. Jack has the benefit of having a Latvian passport, so he actually sidesteps a lot of the bureaucratic fucking tornado nightmare that I deal with. But basically, I'm here on a resident work permit, so I'm allowed to work and live in Germany. But my residential status is a temporary thing that I have to renew every few years, depending on how much of a time period they give you. So the first visa I got right when I came here was for 2 years.
Okay.
And so, that was that was visa number one. Mm-hmm. Then the second time I went in for a renewal, and unfortunately in these situations, you're kind of at the mercy of whoever is working at the immigration office at that day and time that you have an appointment. So this is my fifth visa.
Fifth.
Yeah. So the first one was for 2
goddamn.
years. The second one I got, the person fucking hated me and just was not having me. And, I had some messed up paperwork and stuff. And so she only gave me 1 year. Mm-hmm. Then the next time I went in, I got 2 years. And then in 2020, I went in and got 3 years. And that was like right before we started the podcast, actually. And then this one, they gave me 3 years as well. So.
Okay, so this one's 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, now what happens after this? What happens in 3 years, I mean?
3 years, they're just changing the laws now. So I might be able to actually apply for more permanent residence status, maybe even get a German passport with some of the new laws that they've enacted. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of in a waiting period to see what happens with some proposed changes to the laws. Because the reality is that Germany is facing a bit of a worker shortage. The majority of people that live in Germany that are German citizens are like over, 50, 60 years old.
Okay, so it's an old population.
It's an older population. German immigrants like myself make up about 20% of the population, 16, 20%, something like that. And so they're trying to make it easier for foreigners to get residential status so that they can work because there's worker shortage. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's basically the name of the game. And what made this situation difficult is that when you live in Germany, the official language that must be spoken during official business interactions is German. So even if you're not totally fluent in German, and even if the person you're speaking to is fluent in English, they have to conduct the meeting in German. It's technically the law. Mm-hmm. So, before, when I was kind of more struggling with the language, I always had to bring someone with that could help me translate. And I think there's sort of like an inherent lack of respect thing that they have for you if you don't speak German well. Like they'll kind of look down on you a little bit during the interchange.
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that's a real thing in Germany is that they just like to see that you're trying. The few times before I got my Latvian passport, when I was dealing with my work visa, I didn't have everything perfect, but I had stuff, and they were like, oh, "Okay, cool. Well, you're trying." Instead of just going in like, I don't know, give me some shit, Yeah. I was like, "Hey, here, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that, And if you come in with even a rudimentary version of German, they'll work with you. But if you just walk in and say, I don't fucking know,
Yeah. So
they get mad. It's like, you're not even trying to live here. You know, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
You know,
I'm sure anyone facing any kind of immigration system in any country kind of probably has a similar experience with that native language.
It's just I only know it here.
So
I've never tried to immigrate to any other country.
so going into the office, this was just a couple weeks ago, I had all my paperwork and, living in Germany, you really start to learn about paper. And you really have to like have, nice, clean sheets of bureaucratic evidence of your worthiness of a human being in plastic sleeves. And they're very they're very meticulous about this stuff.
Isn't it strange that they're one of the greenest countries on the planet, yet they want you to print out everything 5 times to go to the government office?
Yeah, it's
stacks and stacks of paper where it's like, but I thought you were green.
It's the nature of the bureaucracy.
I know. I was just trying to say.
So
funny thing.
I went into the office and
did you get interrupted?
My fucking God. So like I said, you're kind of at the mercy of the mood of whoever you're dealing with. And so I try to strategically book my appointments to where I'm not coming in at Monday morning when everyone's all grumpy. And I try not to come in at Friday when everyone just wants to get the fuck out of there. So I usually try to book my appointments when I can, like on a Tuesday after lunch. It's like kind of safe zone, maybe.
Yeah, smart schedule.
Last time went super well. I had a very friendly person. She was very like happy with all of my paperwork and stuff. And, without any hassle gave me a visa. When I walked into this one, my caseworker barely even looked at me, just focused on her screen. She made eye contact with me like once or twice, just kind of very sternly asking me for each document. I held my German down, I was able to totally communicate, maybe not perfect grammar every single sentence, but was able to handle everything. And she was just very, very curt and mean and sort of gave me some shit about, a few details, but also acknowledged that I spoke good German. And I think she's used to punishing people, used to being a bit of a punisher, but I had all the stuff and I was answering in German. I was like, whatever you got, I know how to, I've been through this before. I can do this now. And so she gave me 3 years.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, we still share a storage unit in Seattle.
Yeah.
When are we going to move our shit here?
I don't know. I need a bigger flat.
Yeah, this is true.
Well, also,
what you can see here is all there is. This is it.
Yeah.
These cameras are right up against the back wall,
Yeah.
Well, we talked about that. One day we'll do a walkthrough of your apartment,
yeah,
so people actually know. Yeah.
But the thing is,
a step through.
The other thing that changed is that during COVID, there was a massive chaos with logistics and shipping. And so when we were initially talking about entertaining the idea of, we can just put our stuff on in a shipping container and ship it over, the price of doing that has multiplied by like 3 since the last time we looked at it.
Well, like plane fares have gone up crazy now too, so I assume same with shipping stuff.
Yeah. So I'm happy to have a place where my shit is safe and I don't have to worry about it getting flooded or stolen or anything. But the thought of bringing all that stuff here, I don't know if I would even entertain the idea until I have like the space to deal with it. I mean, all the records alone.
Don't you miss your records though?
I miss them a lot.
I do too, but I mean, I got a good stack of records here. You know, nothing like I have in Seattle, because I feel like it's like almost like starting over again here. You know, like why bother? I have all the records in Seattle. Why am I gonna start over? Ugh.
Yeah.
But occasionally I do buy records, so yeah, I got yeah.
I think it was. I think one thing about moving here that was.
You just interrupted me.
I know. I did it.
But it was totally fair.
I did it on purpose.
I know. If there's a scorecard, you still have like 5 or 6 free ones. So yeah,
But when I first moved here, I really just had the bare essentials. I had a couple suitcases. I had a guitar, my camera equipment, and a laptop, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And it was nice.
And you had a beer to spill on somebody in the subway. Yeah. Hey, throwback to season 1.
If you're the unfortunate person I spilled a beer on the S-Bahn, sorry, but I was new. I really miss my records. Before I moved, I cataloged everything on Discogs just so I would have a mental concept
that's nice.
of like what I had in my collection, and also I just needed it for like insurance purposes and just to know how much my collection was worth and stuff. So I miss it, and sometimes when I go back, I'll dig through my collection and I'll grab some stuff and bring it back. Like one time I brought all my Susie records back, or one time I brought all my New Model Army stuff. It was like I miss them, but at the same time, I can always
Susie and the Banshees. Well, some people don't know.
Sure.
They're like, oh, I love Susie. Sure, better than.
But we did talk about Susie earlier episode.
Did we?
Yeah.
I think I might have been drunk for that one.
Possibly.
Yeah. So you miss your records and.
But I miss them and I don't. Like I'm happy to have kind of a fresh start here, and I've definitely collected, a fair amount of vinyl since I've lived here.
Yeah.
Obviously,
it's decent.
Someday I'll bring all of the collections together and I'll have them all in one place, but I need to have the space first.
I feel like the reason I don't listen to records so much in Berlin is because I don't have all of mine from Seattle. And it seems kind of like this, like, I don't know, there should be a term for that, where if you don't have everything, you don't want anything.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if there's a word for that. I bet you there's a German word
It
for
sounded very sad when I almost cried when I just said that.
It was
out
very
loud,
sad.
Like, oh, poor little, unfortunate middle class European living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sidebar.
I don't have everything. I don't have all my records.
Sidebar, Jack had an amazing record collection, and when I first met him and we first moved in together, when I moved into his house, on the days that I had off and he was like away at work or school, I would go through his records and pick out like the stuff I was curious about. I would make a mixtape from it, and then I would spend the next 2 weeks just like obsessing over it. So Jack's record collection was like a huge door for me because I learned about so much stuff, and we definitely bonded over a lot. We have a very similar taste in a lot of like punk, especially. So it was really cool having kind of this like amazing vault of like incredible like hardcore punk and really interesting international stuff.
I have the first pressing of that Torpedo Moscow album. You just got the repress of.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But anyway,
yeah.
thank you for the compliment. But yeah, I also thought it was cool when you moved in that we were also sharing books as well as records, because you were one of the few punks I'd met that actually was well read and was keeping up on reading, because when I got into punk, that's all it was about, was being literate,
Mm-hmm.
How can you follow Dead Kennedys and Crass lyrics without being literate?
Yeah, without being able to understand the references in those lyrics too.
Right. Not just the words, but the references. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, on that note, I would like to know what you've been reading. That's a easy segue from what you've been listening to what you've been reading.
I think so too. I'm just
Okay.
wondering. I'm just wondering if we should.
Should we smoke first?
Yeah, let's smoke first.
Ha! Took the smoke right out of my mouth. Anyway,
All right, quick break, and then we'll get into reading.
yeah, back to it.
And we're back.
We're back from smoking. Hi, loyal listener. We're talking about books.
Books, what were they?
What were they?
There was a time when people used to read.
Yeah. You and I still do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Going back to what you were saying before we took a break, I always really did appreciate having you in my sphere because I think reading is kind of like this, has unfortunately become this lost art kind of thing where in certain cultures, particularly the US, it's almost like cool not to read or something.
what are you reading for?
What you reading for? It's a Bill Hicks joke for anyone who.
So I don't end up like you.
But particularly lately, I had a writing background. That's actually what I went to school for originally. And I used to read, I have to read fucking like 1,000 pages a week. It was ridiculous. I have just stacks of books and just like, there's no way I'm going to read all this, but somehow managing to do it. And I think you and I had a similar experience where like after fucking college, I was so burned out on reading that I kind of like took a step back from it for a little bit. And maybe you didn't, but
No. I've always read just as much. Just after college, I started reading what I wanted to read, which was just like sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah. I definitely like got back into the swing of it maybe like 4 or 5 years after college, but I really appreciate having printed words on a page that's not like a news article or something short. It's really nice to be able to bury yourself into a story or a history of something and really get a different intake of information that I think is just not replaceable by any kind of visual media whatsoever.
I mean, that's the whole point of reading, is that we can't go everywhere in the world. We can't go everywhere in time. We can't go to different universes or anything like that. The closest we can get to that is by reading somebody else's experiences, and then we can experience the world more so than just our own experiences. So that to me is it. I mean, life is about experiencing, and I want to see the world, and I can't on my own. So sometimes I let other people do that for me. And I think, to me personally, books are the best way to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, people can do that on social media, Instagram, stuff like that, and experience things through other people's photographs and the like, which is all well and good, but I just feel more satisfied by taking a deep dive. I like the deep dives. That's why I like the podcasts about history, the 6 episodes, each 5 hours a piece, about one thing, or a space opera, 3 books, 1,200 pages each, that you just really get like into it. I think that's one of the biggest things for me lately. Anyway, is just to experience things that are outside of my realm.
Yeah. So in a space opera, is there like songs?
No, I mean, not usually. There can be.
For our listeners that might not know, what is a space opera?
A space opera is a long story told in space, and it was coined, I can't remember when, but it was actually an insult to the original space operas because most people thought operas were boring. So they coined the term to talk shit about long, drawn-out sci-fi series. It's like, oh, it's like a space opera, You know what I mean? And now we actually use that as a to me it's a complimentary thing. You know, I hear like, oh, the most involved space opera ever. Yes, I'll take that.
So, what kinds of things happen in a space opera? Is it like kind of?
It's sci-fi, so you know.
I mean, is it kind of like Dune, where it's like, you know, families and histories and, you know, like conflicts and stuff?
I
like,
would consider Dune a space opera, although it definitely has fantasy elements to it. With your typical fantasy element is the chosen one who doesn't know they are, and then are raised up and saves the day. I mean, you see that in space opera is a term for sci-fi, but I don't know what the term for a fantasy opera would be. I guess you just have to say fantasy opera, but you know, Tolkien. Fantasy opera, The Wheel of Time, fantasy opera. You know, there are many fantasy operas out there.
elf opera.
Yeah, but there's not elves in everyone. Game of Thrones is a fantasy opera, you know? So there's no real set rules. It's just a long, drawn out story set in space. Usually. All the ones I've read are.
So when you
are
say
set in
long
space.
drawn out, like how long and drawn out are we talking? Like the whatever you're reading now, like how many books, how many
3 books, 1,200 pages each. you know?
1,200 pages each.
Yeah, but I crushed 1,200 pages in like a month. You know what I mean?
Damn.
I read a lot. I read to go to sleep, and I'm an insomniac. I really have a difficult time going to sleep. So I really have to, I mean, I can't just shut my eyes and go to sleep. It's practically impossible for me. If I'm at a point where I have to go to sleep without reading, it sucks. So it's not necessarily like I think I'm like smart or well read or this or that or the other. It's like, no, I just have trouble sleeping.
I mean, reading helps me sleep as well.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think a lot of it also is like I spend so much time in front of a screen,
Yeah.
whether it's like my phone or my computer or whatever during the day, that you're dealing with so much of like projected images and light and stuff that when you switch to reading, it's like a completely, even if you're on a Kindle or like a, you know, tablet or something like that, it's just a very different way to consume information, and it's a much slower, more kind of thought intentful way of consuming information. And I think it's a good way to wind yourself down from the just constant barrage of edited video that's being thrown at you all day long.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen many people do this. Is like sit on their cell phones for like half an hour before they go to sleep, and then they turn their phone off and close their eyes. But a lot of people don't have as big of trouble sleeping as I do. So more power to them. But to me, it just boggles my mind.
Yeah.
You know, like how do you do that? You know.
Yeah, I need at least a half hour of no screens before I go to sleep.
Yeah, there you go,
Minimum.
there you go.
Otherwise, it's just not gonna happen.
Have you ever looked at a Kindle?
I mean, I've seen people's Kindles and I've
Okay,
like
cool.
interacted with them and stuff. Just my preference, I'm still an old school book person. I like having the book itself. I like having the bookmark. I like having the piece of paper. And I think it's really just, I've resisted the Kindle technology because I don't personally want another device. I like the books because they don't need to be charged. I don't need to.
Yeah, another fucking cord to plug in.
I don't necessarily need to worry about them getting stolen. You know, these days, no one's going to steal a book from you. Trust me. You know, it's the
Excuse me, you should
just-
drop this book.
If you're wondering where to hide your money in 2024, hide it in a book. No one will ever look there, you know.
I switched over to a Kindle because I was traveling constantly, and as much as I read, I'd have to pack so much weight in books that it was just like ridiculous. And in traveling different countries, if I finished a book, it was hard to find another book in English. So for me, the Kindle was absolutely perfect. And sometimes I would share hotel rooms with people who didn't appreciate me having a reading light on all fucking night. Like, please, can you turn that off? I need to go to sleep. It's like, yeah, well, I'm trying to go to sleep too. You know what I mean? I know you prefer like the hard copy of a book, but I just kind of want to get your end note on well, the versus of the two, you know?
I mean, I totally see the benefit and the amazing technology that's around the reading tablets. I think they're really cool, and I'm all for it. You know, I don't judge anyone. I don't think I'm better than anyone because I read paper books. It's not like a hipster thing. It's just a personal preference. When I pull a book out, I'm in a completely different mindset,
Right, which is the whole point of reading,
which is the whole point of reading. And
which is what we were
if,
talking
if
about
I'm
before.
if I'm using reading also not only just for education or entertainment or whatever, it's also just some of the only time that I have where I'm not fucking looking at a screen.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
I
and
get it. Yeah.
and I know the tablets
It's
are
like
different
non-screen time.
and I know they're kind of screens, but not really. They have different texture and they're not as bright or whatever. But it's just I just like interacting with the physical.
I mean,
thing.
they've made the ebooks resembling paper these days to the point where I don't feel so bad about reading one, you know, for my eyes and for my brain. But I think what you're saying is from a psychological aspect, you just like the tangible.
Yeah,
And it makes you feel better in general.
I think there's also something about like it's similar to what really attracts me to like vinyl records.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I also like looking at the fucking artwork. I like,
There you go.
I like pulling the book out of my bag and just glancing at it at a distance. Like there's something about the physical object that I think is very attractive to me still. And that part of that is like, I'm in graphic design, so I gravitate towards like physically produced things because that's like kind of where my bread and butter come from.
Yeah, I can't tell you, since you don't have the book title or the book cover on a Kindle, I can't tell you how many times somebody asked me, what are you reading lately? Like, fuck, what the hell is the name of that book? I don't know. God damn it. Let me get my Kindle and then, but who am I kidding? Nobody ever asked me what I'm reading.
Yeah, probably not.
Speaking of which, why is that? Everybody I know is literate. Everybody I know can read. I'm sure the majority of the people I know do read, but nobody ever actually talks about it. You know, you're one of the only people I know where we will actually talk about the books we've been reading. You know, it's strange to me. Is it some sort of, we were talking about like, what are you reading for? You know, is it just not cool to read and everybody does, but nobody wants to talk about it because they don't think they'll be cool when it's brought up? Like,
I mean, maybe.
I know you've been reading. No, I haven't. I seen your books. No, they're my mom's. You know, is it like that or?
I think it depends on who you're talking to and about, because like I think definitely there is a bit of an anti-intellectual kind of aspect to it where you see some people reading a book, you're like, oh, that person's like an intellectual or that person's a nerd or something. Normal people just watch TV or watch movies. Because why would you read a book when you can just watch something that's like, that looks incredible and that they spent millions of dollars producing? That's part of it, but I don't think that's like the whole story. I think books are antiquated technology, and we have so much new tech at our disposal that why would you read a book when you could have something so much more colorful and amazing and technologically advanced to like get your information from?
But people do, but they don't want to admit it or talk about it.
Or maybe just people aren't interested in it. Like I'm the opposite. I'm fascinated with books. If I see somebody reading something that I've read and that I know that I love, I might even go up to them and be like, that's an awesome book.
Okay.
Great taste.
But you're one of the few, because usually when people ask me what I've been reading, I just say, oh, these shitty sci-fi operas that I'm on lately, That's not all I read, but lately that's just been my kick, But you're one of the few people where I'll say, just some shitty space opera. You're like, what and why? Like, oh well, fuck. You know what I mean? You actually like kind of dig a little deeper to where usually it's just some shitty space opera. It's not that interesting. There's no conversation there. But to you, you're like, yeah, there's a conversation there. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm interested in what people get deeply involved with, because to me, if you're going to dedicate yourself to 1,200 pages of something, even if I'm not interested in the subject matter, I'm interested in what is it about this that sucked you in for 1,200 pages. 1,200 pages for me is a huge, massive commitment to make to something. The books I read generally fluctuate between like 270 to like 500 pages. And those are like, that's generally where like my book attention span lies. I found that if I try to crack into a book that's like 1,000 pages, historically, I won't be very good at finishing it unless it's like amazing.
Okay.
So I try to stick to books that I feel like I can work my way through. I do have a bit of like a raccoon brain sometimes, and I'm oftentimes I'm reading like 4 books at the same time. Because it's hard for me to like really just grab one huge text and be like, I'm just going to go through this whole thing. I might be bouncing. Usually when I'm reading books, I'm bouncing between like 2 or 3 at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do that too when I wasn't reading these fucking 5,000 page epics. You know, I would read many books at a time as well. Maybe like 5-6 years since I got into these like epics. That's all you can do, because if you put it down for too long, you pick it back up and you're like, fuck, I don't remember anything that's going on. You know, because it's always like so many different characters and so many different plot lines and storylines and all that if you just don't keep on it, you completely lose it. You know?
Yeah. These days I tend to stay away from books with maps or with glossaries. Like usually if there's like a map in the beginning, I'm like, I'm not going to fucking follow this.
See, lately, if I'm looking up different series, and if there's not at least 10 books,
you're like, fuck it, I'm not.
That's boring.
Okay.
Or like 3 books with each 12. Like to me, the latest one I've been reading, like 3 books, 1,200 pages. I'm like, is that enough? I don't know. But this is the same to me with podcasts, because I listen to a lot. I mean, what have we been listening to? I also been listening to a lot of history podcasts. And when I research history podcasts, if it's not like one event with multiple episodes, each 4 hours long, I just don't even care. You know, if it's a history podcast and there's episodes that are 30 minutes, I'm like, well, how do you even cracking the surface of that? That's weird to me, you know? I feel like we've lost all our listeners talking about books and history podcasts.
I don't know. I think we just gained a bunch.
This is the Nerd Alert episode.
But why is reading nerdy? I think reading is fucking cool.
Reading's cool as fuck. It's
What's
just
that John Waters quote?
If you go home with somebody and they don't have a library, don't have sex with them. That's sometimes why I feel like kind of a drag with my Kindle, because all my books from the old days are in Seattle, but you know, at home I just have a Kindle. I'm like, nobody will want to sleep with me if they come home with me. Luckily, I live with Julie. So
you know, you also changed my perspective on books quite a bit when we lived together. And one of the things.
Oh, right, I remember that.
Yeah,
when we were packing from the apartment to the house.
Yeah, because you were like getting rid of so many books, and I was like, why would you get rid of your books? And you're like, well, I'm not going to read them anymore. Like, why should I carry them around? I'm like, well, because they're books. And you're like, well, all you do is just put them on a shelf and make you think you're smart for having them on a shelf. And I was like, fuck, I do that. You know?
I think what I told you is Books have energy, and if they just sit on a shelf, then they starve or something along those lines. This is
Create a
like-
vacuum in space.
They create a vacuum in space because they're not being used for what their purpose was, you know. And if you hang on to something that is not being used for what its purpose is, you're creating a vacuum. You know what I mean? If I don't use it and I don't look at it and all I see is the spine on a shelf, then I'm kind of abusing that material thing's purpose. I know. I'm such a fucking hippie. Whatever.
I guess I hold on to books even if I know I'm not going to read them again. Part of it is that I'm hoping that somebody will come into my space
Or somebody will borrow it from
that
you.
I'll be like, you've never read this?
You gotta borrow this from me.
Borrow this. I love loaning people books, but I think I want to adopt the system that I saw someone do a long time ago, where when they loan someone a book, they take a picture of them holding the book,
Oh yeah. There you go.
and then you know where the fuck your book is.
I think that started with VHS tapes.
Yeah, maybe.
We want to get real old school about it. Before books, there was VHS tapes. They made a sequel to Lovecraft Country, or they wrote a sequel to Lovecraft Country. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. Oh, this is one of me and Rob's newest favorite books is Lovecraft Country. Brilliant book. The person who wrote it just wrote a sequel. And if you want some brain dead sci-fi, they just did a sequel to Ready Player One. Me and Rob also read that. But I think you've been reading some books that I haven't read that we want to touch on real quick.
Recently, I'm reading a book called The Sympathizer. This book is intense. It won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. He's a brand new author too. It's like an espionage thriller about Vietnamese defectors after the Vietnam War moving to the US, but still having to kind of carry out directives. And so it's like this murder espionage thriller. It's really, really good. A little dense at first, so it was a little hard for me to break into, but it's a fucking excellent book, and I'm almost done with that.
Okay, cool.
I recently read a book called Slouching Towards Bethlehem. It's by a American author named Joan Didion. Joan Didion really came up during the 60s and was considered one of the forerunners of new journalism. So her and Hunter S. Thompson and people like that were doing a new style of journalism where they were reporting on an event, but talking about their personal experience while they were doing it. When I was studying writing in college, I read a couple of her essays, but I never really did like a deep dive. And so Slouching Towards Bethlehem is a collection of essays that she wrote about the hippie movement in the 60s. So she was kind of embedded in like some counterculture groups in San Francisco and stuff in the 60s. And it's this really interesting existential exploration of this subculture, but also pertaining to her personal life. So Slouching Towards Bethlehem was an excellent book. Joan Didion is amazing. Totally highly recommend.
I wonder, I mean, I see all the books in your library. You been reading anything in German now that you're getting a good handle on the German language?
So the book is Wir Kindern von Bahnhof Zoo.
So the kids at the zoological train stop. Oh, that's a famous one.
Yeah.
About the fucking crazy kids. What era is that? Is that post? So that's during the Cold War.
Yeah.
And Zoe was in West Berlin.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
yeah.
the author is
West Berlin was crazy back in the 80s.
So the author is Christiana F. And she became kind of a culture icon after writing this book, and they also made a film about her experience, and David Bowie's in it. It's a great movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
No, what's it called?
Christiana F. That's the name of the film, but it's based on the book Wir Kindern vom Bahnhof Zoo.
I think they just made a recent series in German about that as well.
Really?
Yeah.
I would watch the fuck out
I'd
of
have
that.
to ask Julie.
The film is fantastic. It's really, really, really
Okay.
good.
Okay.
But because I've seen the film, Like I know
Helps you with the
I've
book.
got context. And so when I'm reading something in German, even like sometimes I've got some books that are even for like young adults in German because it's more or less like my reading level. It can be
in German.
It can be easy to, it can be easy to get lost in when you're reading something in a foreign language because you don't recognize all the words. But if you already have a familiarity with the story, then reading becomes much different because you already have pretext
Yeah.
to work off of. And so, if you're reading something like Harry Potter or Treasure Island or some book that you've already read and you're already familiar with, it's easier to digest. And that's also one of my strategies with watching stuff in German too. I would go through series and watch series that I had already seen every episode in English from. Then you rewatch it in German overdub, and even though like the voices are different, it's a little, you already know the storylines. So when you're watching it, you can actually absorb it better.
Because it's easier to pick it back up when you get lost.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing. Me and Julie, we were watching this series in German, Last One Laughing. Anyway, it's a bunch of comedians, and everybody's trying to make each other laugh. And if you laugh, you get knocked out. So we're watching it in German with English subtitles, and it was easy for me to watch because if I wasn't paying attention, it didn't matter. I could just jump back in anywhere, you know?
Reading in German it's interesting because you're reading and you're translating in real time. So you have a different experience of a text because you're absorbing it in German and then your brain has to decode it into English. So at some point, unless you're reading a translation, you're going to have a bit of a communication breakdown in there somewhere. And you're not exactly reading the same book. And that's why translations of books really vary in their quality. Sometimes you read a translation of like Les Miserables or something and it's not good. The code switching thing is very interesting when you're reading in a foreign language. That's kind of the experience of living in Germany too. Right. Is that you're sitting in a bureaucrat office and they're saying something to you, and then while they're saying it to you, you're kind of having to translate it in real time. And while you're translating it, they're telling you more stuff.
Yeah. That's
and maybe there's
problem
like
I have. Like I'm always like a couple words back, and then I miss that word, and then it's like leapfrog.
Yeah.
You know
so maybe
I mean?
There's like stuff that they're telling you while you're translating that you missed. And when you finish translating, they're like, and what do you think about what I just said? And you're like,
got half that.
Good.
About half. How do you say that in German?
But maybe that's something we could carry on in our next episode.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk about like do a deep dive into because we did that moving to Germany episode. We talked a little bit about what it was like to first move here. I think a good season finale, episode 10, would be what it really, like after the 8-9 years we've been here, what we really know about it, Yep. Before we were giving our first impressions, now I'd like to talk about what the fucking, I don't know, whatever the opposite of a first impression is. Yeah. Deep dive, I guess. Sure. Deep dive into living in Germany.
Sounds good.
Without being jerks about it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're going to pick this up and we're going to give you guys the real lowdown on what it is like to live in a foreign country for a long time and still have many interesting thoughts about it, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, what this podcast, interesting thoughts about stuff. Mm-hmm. Hopefully. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, cool. We'll see you next time, and our sign out is ciao.
Ciao.
You didn't do it.
You didn't even count.
Yeah, I'm not supposed to count. You can't count the outro.
Or you at least have to give me like a visual.
I did.
No, you had like two pointing fingers.
Like, ciao.
No, this is you. This is Yosemite Sam.
This is like when you turn, you watch. When the guitar player watches the drummer and they see this stick go up and they go.
Yeah, the stick go up, not like. What am I supposed to do with this?
Next time, give me some drumsticks, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Right. Play drum. Anyway, sorry you had to listen to the outro, but now we're gonna have the real podcast when we shut the mics off. I don't know if people realize that, but the best part of the podcast is when we actually stop recording.
I think anyone who listens to this podcast knows that the best part of this is when the mics are off.
No, they know it's when they're yeah. What he said.
Anyways, please give us a review.
Hey, like us, give us a review, subscribe, all that shit.
Yeah.
Helps us out.
Yeah.
You don't need to be so polite. You can tell people, give us a fucking review.
I don't want to bark at people. That's weird.
Yeah, but I do.
Okay.
You just
Well,
go
he's gonna
like,
bark at you.
Hey, Jack, bark.
I'm gonna ask you politely, but
Yeah.
it really helps us out. And yeah, find us on YouTube, on Friendster, MySpace.
We're on Friendster.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, what? Wait.
ICQ. Message us on ICQ.
Yahoo.com.
Find us on Yahoo, CompuServe.
MapQuest.
We're on AOL and Prodigy.
Oh, right.
Netscape.
Oh, fuck that. I can't even keep up. You're nailing all of them. This is great.
Yeah, find us on Netscape and CompuServe.
What was the very first thing on the internet?
I think it was Prodigy.
Prodigy? What was Prodigy?
Prodigy, I mean, my dad had it. It was like
I mean, I know they did that Burning Down the House song.
No, that was...
Firestarter.
Yeah, you're thinking Talking Heads.
I mean, my head is talking, so...
Prodigy was like they had like some chat rooms and
I'm the Firestarter.
And there was sort of like this very rudimentary version of the internet before I think CompuServe and then AOL after that. So I think it went Prodigy, CompuServe, AOL.
Fuck, crazy.
I think.
Anyway, we should do a podcast someday about like the early days of the internet and anyway, let's just get out of here.
Yeah, we haven't actually been recording this whole time.
Really? Oh, that's perfect. Okay. Anyway, ciao.